Fatal Fury Special for the Sega Game Gear, released in 1994 courtesy of Takara, is a competent adaptation of the SNK Neo Geo arcade classic fighting game of the same name. And not only is it a competent adaptation of an arcade title that ran on significantly more powerful hardware, but it's also a pretty decent fighting game in its own right. I'd imagine one would have picked this up back in the day, expect it to be less than stellar, and come away pleasantly surprised by the quality of the game. Holy crap, a fighting game on the Game Gear that doesn't suck! What are the odds? Well, considering you have two rather excellent Power Rangers fighting games as well as a couple semi-decent Mortal Kombat games on the system, I'd say the odds are pretty good. But back to Fatal Fury Special. As you might expect, Fatal Fury Special on the Game Gear is a significantly stripped down version of the arcade classic. You only get 9 out of Special's 16 fighters. Terry, Andy, Joe, Mai, Duck King, Old Bald Guy, Geese Howard, Billy Kane, and Art of Fighting mainstay Ryo, whatever. They're the only ones to make the transition, with that guy being made available for play from the start, as opposed to being a secret opponent you need to unlock. The multi-plane switching feature that was a trademark of the Fatal Fury games, the early ones at least, have been removed from this version, and there's no character-specific endings, only a generic winning pose when you beat the arcade/King of Fighters mode. However, what did make the transition to the Game Gear is in relatively top form. Each fighter has their set of special moves that they can pull off with relative ease, as the controls are nice and responsive. Yes, the controls have been simplified to accommodate the lower button count of the Game Gear, and it's possible a couple move inputs might have been changed as a result, but for the most part, command inputs are the same as the Neo Geo original as far as I know, so there's not much of a huge transition from big screen to little screen. And the gameplay for the most part holds up rather nicely. The action's fairly fast-paced, there's little if any lag or slowdown to be found, the hit detection is charitably solid, there's a missed move here or there on rare occasion, but otherwise fairly solid stuff. And you have your desperation moves that you could execute when your meter's in the red. It plays pretty good, it's fun to play, even when you're getting your ass kicked. Despite the missing bits, it more than makes up for it by making the rest of the package quite smooth. And that's a good thing. Aside from the arcade/King of Fighters mode, you also have a versus mode as well as a survival mode, which is really more of a team play mode where you have 2 teams of 6 fighters going at each other in elimination fashion. Both these modes can be played against a computer or against a second player via Game Link adapter, so that's good fun. Graphically speaking, Fatal Fury Special looks pretty good on the Game Gear. It could have went with a chibified format much like SNK's Game Boy or Neo Geo Pocket Fighters, but they kept it similar to the original version and it looks fine. The character portraits look pretty good even with some lesser colors. You can make out who's who even in this miniaturized format. The various levels resemble their original forms well enough, perhaps not quite as animated, but you do have the transitions between rounds where one round you're fighting during the day and then the next round you're fighting at night. And while Special does suffer from some flickering issues at times and the sprite animation might not be the smoothest piece of business at times, on a whole, this is a nice looking fighter on the Game Gear and it really could have been worse. Sound wise, well, they tried. No voice bites to be found here, and that's not much of a surprise. The stock sound effects don't really do much for me, but they're stock sound effects, so it's like whatever. Soundtrack's pretty much the original arcade music translated to the Game Gear format, and it sounds fairly decent for the most part. It might not be the most accurate recreation of those arcade tunes, it goes without saying of course, but they managed a fair approximation, and you know what? It's alright, I can't really complain here. Overall, if you want a genuinely good fighting game on the Game Gear that has nothing to do with the Power Rangers, then Fatal Fury Special fits the bill quite nicely. Despite some of the missing bits from the source material and some general hardware limitations, what did make the transition is done well enough that it serves as a pretty fun fighter in its own right, and is proof enough that the Game Gear is more than capable of pulling off the fighting game thing quite nicely when done properly. So yeah, Fatal Fury Special on the Game Gear, damn good game.